Good evening, everyone, and welcome into Beyond the Box Score, our weekly program where we break down all the latest action from high school, college, and the pros here on Pulaski Citizen Live. I'm your host, Mark Mize, joined once again by my co-host, Chandler Harmon. Chandler, we both got haircuts just in time for, we didn't plan this, by the way, just in time for the start of district play for both Giles County and Richland. It's all been leading up to this. And I really feel like all four teams had a pretty good run in non-district play, and we learned a lot about their strengths and the things they're going to need to improve on to take home those district crowns.
Oh, absolutely, Mark. And I think that, not only did we see what they, their strengths and weaknesses, I think they have figured them out as well. And that they have identified those places that they can improve right before we get into district play next week. And I think it's going to be a really exciting start to the district play part of the season.
It should be. And of course, it's an exciting time in sports in general. We're getting closer and closer to the national championship for college football as well. By the way, it's time for the playoffs in the NFL too. And so, a lot of exciting things happening right now. But of course, our number one focus is high school basketball. It's that time of year. The games always count. But when it comes to your postseason seeding, non-district play really doesn't matter that much compared to district play because, of course, unlike football, in basketball, you're probably not going to see those same tiebreaker situations where non-district's really going to come into play. And so it all comes down to this, and we're starting the stretch run that will lead to a postseason run in March in which hopefully we'll see multiple teams find their way to Murfreesboro. But we're going to learn just a little bit more about that in a moment, but we're going to take a quick time out, hear from some of our fantastic sponsors, and then talk a little Giles County basketball here on Beyond the Box Score.
Years, PES Energize has been proudly powering our community in Pulaski and Giles County, Tennessee. We're more than just an electric utility. We also offer internet, TV, and phone services. Our commitment to our customers and our community is what sets us apart. We're dedicated to providing safe, reliable, and innovative services. At PES Energize, we believe that serving you is a privilege. We're here for all your energy needs. Visit PESenergize.com or call us today.
Can trust. Our extensive knowledge of the market and industry allows us to help our clients with any real estate need. We know how to get results. So whether you're looking to buy, sell, or rent, let us put our expertise to work for you. Call us today at 931-347-9150 or visit HaneyRealtyPem.com to learn more. Haney Realty and Property Management, your best friend in real estate.
And we're back here on Beyond the Box Score. I'm your host, once again, Mark Mize, joined by co-host Chandler Harmon. Chandler, Giles has one game this week versus non-district Summit to close it out before, of course, they're going to be playing Lawrence County to open district play next week. That's the really fun thing about the current district schedule for Giles is you think about they have Lawrence, which is the cowbell game on the basketball court. You have Marshall County, probably historically their biggest rivalry. And then, of course, you have Tullahoma and some of these other teams that, kind of are sub-rivalries in their own right. And so it's going to be a lot of fun. But this week you have, of course, you got a chance to cover them last night, which, of course, would be Tuesday night when they played their first non-district game of the week. And then, of course, Friday they play versus Summit as well. But second game versus Lincoln County Tuesday night. First off, on the girls' side, kind of what did you see from the Giles girls, and how do you feel about where they are as they're in their final week before the start of the district season?
Yeah, Mark. I mean, it was a tough loss for the girls' side, but I think it helped them to kind of, as Scott and I talked about when we were on the radio, that it's one of those matchups you want to have right before district because it's one of those ones that kind of iron sharpens iron. You're playing a really good Lincoln County team that you think they also have everything put together, and so. I think it showed the girls that they still got to work a little bit on moving the ball in transition. Inbounding the ball seemed to be a little bit of trouble for them. But I think that overall, I feel the girls are pretty much ready for district play. They've got a few areas on offense and defense they need to work on. But this is the same girls team that we've seen as far into this season really play good defense. I think that last night was kind of a fluke game for them, and that as we get into district, they'll still continue to be a very good defensive team.
Of course, for those who don't know, Lincoln County, a Class 4A team, which is the highest classification for basketball Lincoln's always very consistently good on the girls' side. They have been for quite a while. Honestly, in girls' sports in general, that softball team has been fantastic, made multiple state tournament runs recently, and so that's kind of what they're known for. Giles, though, first game this year versus them, beat them. So he ended up splitting the season series, which I think is pretty impressive and kind of shows how far Giles has come from a couple years ago now, where they're beating quality teams like Lincoln, even if Lincoln was able to get them back last night.
Yeah, Mark, and I think that we're seeing a Giles girls team that has been surprising. We knew they'd be good, but they're better than we thought they'd be. Reese has continued to grow as a defensive anchor for them, and I think that they're really, reaping from the success of her growth as a player this year. I think that they'll continue to surprise people as we now get into district play, and I think that we might very well see them in Murfreesboro later this year. Speaking
of district play, of course, I think this is going to be a really interesting district season. If I looked around correctly I think that I'll be honest, I think Giles is probably one of the top 3 teams in that district. And so I think they, have a legitimate shot to be that team fighting for the number 1 seed there, just because Giles does so many things well. They have such deep guard play. They have some of the best size in the post of any Class 3A team that I've seen so far this year. And so I just think they have a lot of things going for them. But of course, the district season, especially when you play so many of your local rivals, anything could happen. And I think it's going to be a pretty good one. Oh, absolutely, Mark. And I think that when you schedule a tough beginning half of the season as they have and you go 10-4, you're probably doing a lot of things right, especially considering, they split their record last year and they're already, on pace to do better than last year. And so I think that this starting half season has shown us that they can be a great team in district play and even go as far as competing for that first seed. Especially as, they're still growing as a team. This is still, we just now gotten to the crucial part of the season. They're going to continue to build an identity, and I think that they are going to really shock other teams in the district. And of course, last season, Giles was much improved. They had a really great non-district run. In district play, they kind of stumbled a little bit, but I just don't foresee that happening again. I really think this team is for real. And like I said, I just think they have too many weapons to stop on any given night. They're too deep of a team, and they've really started to build that depth over the last couple years there. And so should be very interesting to see. And so once again, they will be playing Friday night non-district game against Summit there. I believe they would be sweeping the season series versus Summit because they beat them in game 2 of the year. Yes, they did. Yeah. So that'll be a great one. Looking over to the boys' side now, of course, they had a tough 1-point loss last night to a pretty good Lincoln County team, Class 4A boys team as well there. Just how'd you feel about what you saw on the court? Mark, as Scott and I were talking about on the radio last night, it's one of those games that the only thing that they did wrong was they just didn't win. They played their hearts out. It was a great game for them. It's similar to what I said about the girls. It's one of those matchups you want to have right before district play that gets you ready for it. They were playing like it was a district game that would decide seeding, but it really didn't. It's just an extended preseason game almost. And so they came out, they played their hearts out. It identified a little bit of weaknesses scoring, still trying to figure out who their number 2 and number 3 option are behind Case and Howard when he can't score. Granted, he did score 36 points last night, but they still are trying to find more scorers and more people to get open. But I think overall they're in a good position for district play. They've played some very, very good teams, opening with Page, playing a very good Lincoln County team yesterday. I think that that's gotten them ready, and I think that as we get into district play, we'll see them continue to grow scoring-wise and just be a very good team. And I really think that, the district season is set up for them to be in the top half of the district standings on that side too. And once again, have a chance to, bring home that district title. It'll be pretty interesting though, because a lot of their district opponents have been kind of up and down, just as they've been. And so I think that there are probably a few more unknowns on the boys' side for that district race than there is for the girls' side there. And so that'll be interesting. And we'll get a chance to see all that get underway next Tuesday versus Lawrence County. Yeah, absolutely, Mark. And that's going to be a very telling matchup for them. You always want to start off 1-0 in district play. And so I'm optimistic. I think that the boys have shown a lot of promise. And as Coach Campbell talked about in his interview with me last night, they intentionally scheduled this first half of the season to be this way to get them ready for these matchups, these crucial opening games like against Lawrence County in district play to start off that district play run. They're ready. I think that, we've seen them be a little bit up and down, but I think that they know what they have. And I think that
they have a good core team that will help them to go far once they start to answer a little bit of the questions that we as fans have.
Yeah, and like we said earlier, the hardwood edition of the Cowbell game versus Lawrence County, I think that's probably one of the most interesting district matchups you could start with there. And of course, part of that is the fact that we were talking about it last week. Lawrence County 2-14 on the year, and immediately you're just like, you kind of scoff at that record. But they got back two starters that they were missing for almost the entire non-district half of the season. And suddenly, I think they're a little bit of a dangerous team too. And that kind of underscores my point that I really think that you can't take anything for granted in this district, and you're going to have to come to play every night. I think that Giles, though, really looks like they have a very favorable district schedule. And no one that they're going to play in district, I think, is going to be tougher than some of the teams, as you mentioned, that they've already played in non-district play.
Yeah, Mark, I mean, if you look at that Muscle Shoals matchup, that's the one that I've kind of identified over the past few weeks when talking to people as showing, the level of versatility that in the teams that they scheduled. I mean, the odds of them playing more physical teams than Muscle Shoals or Lincoln County and a few other teams, you're probably not going to see that level of physicality and, intensity from many other teams in this district. So I think that they have a very favorable schedule and a schedule that they will do well in. I just, I want to see how they do against Lawrence County next week, as Lawrence County, as you talked about, has improved. They've gotten some players back. So that opening matchup will tell us a lot about where that Giles boys team is going to go.
Yeah, and it's funny, when I was doing some research this past week, I can't remember who it was now. It was one of Richland's opponents, I think, also played Muscle Shoals on the boys' side, and they got beat by 40-something. And so, suddenly you look at that's one thing you have to remember is you look at a loss and you say, oh man, you lost that game. But once again, you kind of have to look at how is that team doing versus other. What is that team doing? And, there's some teams that are just really dominant teams. It's hard to win every single game of the year. Not many. That's one thing that was so impressive about Loretto last year, going undefeated start to finish and winning that state championship is, it had been a little while, I think, since a AA team had run the table to win the championship. Basketball just isn't, unlike football, I think basketball is a much harder sport to, not just only because there's more games, but because of the type of schedule you're playing, where you're playing multiple games per week, where it's such a long and, arduous season. You have injuries, you have players who might be sick, you have holidays, and obviously, tournaments that you might not get everybody out for. I think that hey, that's going to happen sometimes. And so, like I said, been really impressed with Giles. And on the girls and the boys side, fascinated to see what you're going to catch Friday night, but even more interested to see what we get next week when the games really start to count.
Absolutely, Mark. And I think district play is going to be, very exciting, kicking it off next week. And I'm just ready to see, how far both teams will go and see all the exciting matchups along the way as we go with them.
Definitely, and we'll have all of them for you as you'll have a chance to catch Chandler's stories and the photography you'll get in the Pulaski Citizen next week, print edition, and also online there as well. So we're going to take another quick time out, hear from our sponsors, and we'll be back with the Richland segment as Jennifer and I talk Raider basketball here on Beyond the Box Score.
To Insurance, Winterburn and Associates Insurance is the team you can trust. We offer coverage for your home, auto, business, and more. We work hard to find the best policy for you at the best price. Our personalized service means we take the time to understand your needs and make sure you understand your options. We want you to feel confident and secure with your insurance policy. Let us make insurance simple for you. Get a quote today at winterburinsurance.com or call us at 931-363-8638.
And we're back here for our Richland segment here on Beyond the Box Score. I'm your host, Mark Mize, joined once again this week by Jennifer Hawkins. Jennifer, last couple games of non-district play for both the Raiders and the Lady Raiders, and some really impressive wins. Saturday, they go to Marshall County and sweep the night. And then, of course, on Tuesday night, you go to Wayne County, one of the toughest places to play in all of Single A, and both the girls and the boys come out with victories. So if there was a way to set you up for success Friday night versus Cornersville to start district play, I feel like this was the way to do it.
Yeah, good warm-up games before you're getting into those district games, those matchups that really, truly count. You don't want to say the others don't count. They do go on your record, but it's those district matchups that you got to make sure you win. So coming off the break, of course, they had the Christmas Classic for a couple days over the break to see some different competition, but then I got a few days off and then kind of coming out of the break and from winter holidays and such. What's your team going to do? How are they going to respond? And I think both teams responded beautifully. I think coaches should be proud of what they did because they, the Wayne County, both those games really kind of came down to the wire and stuff. And the Marshall County, that boys game was overtime. And, so they had to gut those out to get those victories, and they responded well. So it kind of fuels them going into Friday night's matchup.
Well, let's talk girls first. So the Lady Raiders come out, win in pretty dominant fashion at Marshall County. Marshall is kind of a middling team there in Class 3A. We'll hear more about them, of course, as they're a Giles County district foe this year. But Richland, a dominant 22-point victory. That's one of those games where it's kind of hard to learn too much from an opponent in which Richland really, of course, should have won that game, and they won it convincingly. But when you look at the way that other teams have played Marshall, Richland, once again, I know it kind of gets down to nitpicky when you're talking about comparing, how much did you beat them by compared to how much did someone else beat them by? But it stacks up well. And so I know, as we talked about last week, Wade always says non-district play, December basketball, although technically this was January. How much does it mean? But impressive win, and anytime you go on the road, I think we see just how important that is to get those reps in with those good road wins.
Well, I mean, we'll call it December ball because, that's what your brain thinks when you're still on that vacation anyway. But, we'll let Wade be right for once or twice in a time. But, no, I think it was one of those that you don't want to say they coasted or anything like that. They had to work hard to get that type of victory. And I say this all the time. You're dealing with teenagers.
Yeah.
You never know. I mean, honestly, on any given night, wild things can happen. There's some different illnesses going around in the community and stuff, and so is everybody 100%? And which, not saying any of the basketball players aren't or anything like that, but you just wonder, things like that can creep up. You want players to stay healthy. You want things to come together at the right time, and the girls are really just kind of clicking on all cylinders. And I think you're getting good play from individuals, but they're making that team effort. They're really starting to gel and come together right when districts are ramping up.
I think defense was kind of one of the big factors for me in these two games. First, versus Marshall, you hold them 28 points. Anytime you hold any team, especially, once again, a Class 3A team, they have a lot of girls in that school to pull from. And historically, Marshall haven't been world beaters, but they're usually pretty consistently good. They're almost at 500 this year, slightly below 500. But then you hold Wayne, which once again, I think a lot of people, Wayne 13-4 on the season, I believe, as of recording. Two of those losses, of course, are to Richland, so they're 13-2 versus other teams. I think most people think Wayne is a top 8, top 10 team in the entire state. Richland, first time around, it was really back and forth. Ava Ashley had a great game for them in the post. I think she's an all-state caliber type player. This time around, Richland got up by 10 points in the fourth quarter, kind of had to sweat it out at the end, winning 45-42 there. But, I think if you look at all the wins this year, I think those two Wayne wins have to be two of their three best. I would put the Loretto win in there as well, just to be honest with you. But for those of you who aren't keeping really close tabs on this, Richland girls may have the best resume of any Class A team in non-district play. And a 3-point road win at Wayne County, that just adds to it. You had a chance to see some of the game. Just how did you feel about what you saw from the girls?
Well, I think you made an important point there at Wayne County. That is a hard place to go and get a win. And Wayne County, historically, there's just always a good matchup for the Richland girls. And so, they had to kind of eke it out at the end. And that's what, talking to some of them today, I was like, good win last night, but man, they're like, I know, because it got a little closer than they intended, but they stuck with it, and they, kind of that grit gets in there. And it's just that exceptional defense to shut teams down. They figure out, they pester so much. There's just so many words, that they're just kind of everywhere. But you go back to their first matchup with Wayne County, it was back and forth the whole first half. They made adjustments at halftime and kind of came out the second half and really kind of dominated in the second half, and it started with that defense and causing turnovers and causing panic. And it's just one of those, you can almost see frustration from other teams, like they just won't go away, because you try to spin out of one player or out of something, and then here comes somebody else setting a trap or something, and they're good at getting them into the corners and just causing turnovers. And it's just, they're so quick. And they just feed off of each other, and it's going to be exciting to watch them as they progress through district and into playoffs as the season continues.
One, I think the most important factors to me the last few weeks is I think that McNeese and Galloway have really picked up the scoring load. I mean, McNeese had 19 points in one of the wins last week. I forget which of the two it was. But, you're seeing them kind of taking some of that pressure off of Bailey Blair. Everyone's playing great defense. And then, of course, you have the other players like Kate Kirk. Usually going to be good for 6 to 10 points every night there in the post as well. She's a player who, when you need a bucket, you can, play the post there. And even versus some of the all-state caliber players, you've seen her be able to back some of them down and kind of impose her authority there, her will. I think that has been the biggest thing, and that's the one thing that coming into the district season, getting ready for it, was the thing I was most concerned about. Was in week one, how much scoring are you going to get out of some of these girls to replace the scoring that you lost from Higgins? Higgins averaged, I believe, 18 points a game last year. You weren't going to replace 18 points per game in one player.
No.
Because last year, you had, I think, 19 and 18 points per game, respectively, between Blair and Higgins, something along that lines. You weren't going to get those 18 points back initially, just from one player. But I think that McNeese, Kirk, and then, of course, Galloway as well now, who is getting more and more time off the bench. And offensively, has just been a revelation. I think she probably has one of the highest shooting percentages on the team. I think that was the thing I needed to see, and I think that that's the thing that I feel a lot better about this team now, having had a chance to see that.
I think Kirk's growth as the season progresses, just as her freshman season, she was good, but she's figuring out.
She wasn't a primary scorer,
right?
though.
But she's figuring out how to use her height to her advantage, and she's always been an aggressive player, but now she's figuring out how to kind of use that to her benefit. And we've seen too that there's been nights that if somebody else is struggling a little bit, there's times that Blair's getting double, triple team, sometimes quadruple team. Of course, a lot of times that still doesn't stop her, but that's leaving others open, and they're gaining the confidence to go ahead and take those shots. And Elizabeth Gordon, who we talk about her defense, but there's times that if she's got to step up, she can. We've seen Bailey Hollis do that in some games, and so they don't worry about who gets the accolades, who's getting the stats. It comes down to how are they going to get the W, and that's what's got to be important in a team sport.
So Lady Raiders, kind of a little preview to the district season. That district schedule, Huntland has won about as many as they've lost there. Fayetteville City had one of the best games I saw a team have this year, three-point shooting-wise, versus Giles, but they've also had a lot of games when they're not shooting the three ball well. They're a little suspect there, and so those teams are probably going to be kind of the lower half of the district. But then you have a Moore County team that a lot of people are kind of saying, they went to the state tournament last year as well, of course. They were the other team from that region. They ended up going to the state tournament last year, as Richland, of course, went on to the state semifinals. Moore is probably considered a top 10 team again. You look at their resume, they don't have a lot of quality wins. They did beat Cascade, by the way, a team that Richland had a tough game against and lost to. But their losses are really close losses to really, really great teams. And so I think Moore is going to be very good, and I think that's going to be one of the premier matchups of the district season. But the team that I think is really, really playing better than a lot of people probably would have guessed coming into the season, Cornersville's only got 2 losses on the year. Now, you look at their schedule and a lot of the common opponents, and Richland's quality of schedule and the way they're beating teams, just to me, makes me feel pretty comfortable that Richland's the better team. But Cornersville has come to play this year. Cornersville, I think, is now like 11-2, 12-2 coming into the district season, and so they're for real. And so I really think this district race is going to come down to Richland, Moore, and then Cornersville maybe sneaking into that bunch too. So this is going to be a good district campaign, probably a little better than some of the ones in District 10A that Richland had seen in the past now that they're moving over to District 9A. And you have some more quality teams.
Yeah, never sleep on that Cornersville matchup. That's that Battle of Beaufort Station that we talked basketball version. And so Friday night, that's one of those that, and the girls know that, the coaching staff knows that. they know what's coming into the gym Friday night, so it should be a fun matchup. But I think we'll get a glimpse of how far our girls have come, but also a little bit of how good is Cornersville, because I think they could be a little sneaky and maybe worm their way in a little more than people are giving them credit for. So, but like I said, that's always a fun matchup. Nobody wants to miss that game, so that'll be a good one Friday night.
I'll tell you, the only thing that I think District 9A is missing is in the reclassification here. I really would have liked to see Eagleville stay in 9A.
Yeah.
You know, Eagleville and Richland actually switched places, so they moved over to 10A. They moved west while Richland moved east. And, you know, this year it wouldn't have really mattered because Richland's significantly better than Eagleville this year. But year to year, I really would have liked to see Eagleville as a district matchup there so they can see them more often, even though they usually play in non-district play. So that's really my only note for those who are drawing back up the districts was Eagleville moving west was kind of an odd decision there. And I think making it a 6-team district and bringing Eagleville back over would have been a good choice.
We'll send this in and let them look at your
see
thoughts and see if they see if they agree. So,
looking over at the boys' side now, you know, Richland 2 weeks ago we were singing a different tune in terms of we had some legitimate concerns. Obviously, Eagleville is winning their games by about 28 points per game, so them beating Richland by 30 plus probably not too surprising because Eagleville is, just in my opinion, one of the most definitive number one teams in the state that I've seen in several years in boys Class A ball. I mean, Eagleville's just unbelievable right now, and a team that Richland may see in the postseason as well. But then the loss to a reinvigorated Lawrence County team as well. You know, I think we had a few concerns a couple weeks ago after that 2-game losing streak, 2 of only 3 losses that Richland's had all year. However, since then, Richland has kind of put their stamp, you know, sweeping the Richland Christmas Classic, which we talked about last week. And now they had a harder 2-game stretch than the girls did. Because while the Marshall girls are, you know, kind of so-so, the Marshall boys are pretty for real. Mm-hmm. And so you went to Marshall and won by 2 points with, we'll mention kind of the other adversity they faced there. And then you come down and you go to Wayne County and you win by 2 points in that game. So these really close games in which Richland is beating really quality opponents on the road, I think really speaks to how well they've rebounded from that tough 2-game stretch, which, I mean, it's even hard to call it a tough 2-game stretch. It's such a blip on the radar of the full season, but just, you know, them bouncing back really shows they are the team that we thought they were in terms of the heights of how good they can be this year. But kind of the elephant in the room there is Jason Lovelace gets what a lot of people are calling kind of an unfair ejection and a 2-game suspension after the Marshall County game due to kind of a little disagreement with the referee there. And what's really impressive, I'll let you speak to that in a moment, but what's really impressive is that they come in with, you know, have to finish out that game without him. And now they have to go 2 games with Gordon as head coach, which I'm sure probably not going to change too much. Really, that's one thing I've always loved about Richland is what a deep coaching staff they have in terms they have usually 3 guys who all 3 would be perfectly fine being the head coach of the team. But the fact that without their head guy, they're still able to produce the results we saw.
Yeah, and it's one of those, I've been around Coach Lovelace years enough, and so he just picked up 2 very quick back-to-back technicals. That is not his character. It's not who he is. You know, he may have gotten 1. He probably admits to that, but he'd back off immediately. But evidently they were so quick that, you know, he didn't even have a chance to respond. So as rules say, that's what's got to happen. And so you're right. The guys had to dig deep to get that overtime win at Marshall County Saturday night. Then go to Wayne County. And of course, now they're without Cooper Jackson, possibly at least for a week. He's got a wrist injury, and they're waiting to kind of see what's going to come of that. So hopefully it's going to be a short term and it's just, you know, just a minor sprain or something, but it could be a little more significant than that. So Lane Dooley stepped in and got that starting role last night. And so you're without your head coach, without one of your starters, you know, and you still find a way to win because they had a slow start at Wayne County last night. I mean, they just weren't really hitting, and but they just kind of kept clawing away and played their style of game. So that is credit to Coach Lovelace that he's got them set up, ready to go. And even though he's not there, they know what to do. And like you said, they had to get better at rebounding. You know, the Lawrence County game, I really think that's where, if you look at statistics, they just weren't blocking out. They weren't, Lawrence County got too many second chance points. And so I'm sure that became a focus during practice was you got to get to the boards and you got to, you know, take away those rebounds from other teams, and it's making a difference because you don't want to give up second, third chance points and shots. So last night, you really kind of got to see how are these guys going to respond? And they, figured out a way to dig deep and get a win again at Wayne County. And I know that sounds like we keep focusing on that, but it is. It's just hard to go there and win. It's always such a well-led program, and they're coached well and always ready to go. So those are fun matchups again. And so it was nice for them to dig deep. Jack Jackson had a big 3 right at the end that put us up, and then they had to kind of finish out because Wayne County had to burn fouls, and so with that foul change and stuff, but they found a way just to get it done and walk away with that 2-point victory. It was a close one, but man, it's been some exciting times to watch some basketball.
Yeah, and you'll remember for Wayne County, they were a state semifinalist last year in Class A. They only returned 2 of their 5 starters, but one of them is All-State Cayman Canfield. And then, of course, they have some really good young talent. You and I were talking about it with, I'm going to forget the third guy's name, but of course, Case Bryant, the younger Bogus brother, of course, Blair Bogus, obviously a starter and probably an all-conference player for MTSU as a freshman, Blair, after being a former Miss Basketball for him. And then I forgot the other underclassmen.
There was
they had another big that was really good. I apologize. I should have looked it up before the show. But anyway, really quality young players around Canfield. And so Wayne is a team that's just going to get better every week, because you have Canfield kind of leading the charge with those younger guys getting more and more minutes. But just such an impressive win. And I will say this is the second time that I'm kind of like, hey, I'm kind of questioning some of the rules or what is happening in the state with the TSSAA, but I don't really understand why a double tech.
Why did they not ask your opinion more, Mark? I mean, they should just be calling you.
I'm just glad that they even let us show up to the state tournament. I say all this. They're going to watch this, and then
get him out of here.
They're going to when Richland girls do go to the state tournament, they're not going to let us in. But I don't really understand why a double tech is resulting in a 2-game suspension. Did you get any clarification on that? Because in the NBA, of course, which is my only frame of reference for this, a double tech, if you get a certain number of technicals, you have to actually serve a multiple game suspensions after that. But this is the soccer equivalent of a soft red.
Right.
I don't really understand why it would result in a multi-game suspension.
It seems a little excessive, but I don't know if that's just how the rule is currently written. I just need to dig into it. I hadn't really ever thought about it because our coaches don't really ever have to deal with that. And
I've never seen them get
so I've never really dug into it to see. So I'll probably be looking it up in the next few days just to kind of see what the rule. I guess it's just how it's written right now, but it does seem a little excessive especially for 1A high school ball.
It wasn't an ejection due to an action that got you kicked out. Like it was a double tech, so it was 2 individual actions. Just saying, oh well, you automatically get kicked out because of 2 technicals. So I mean, it's not like something egregious happened. So I don't know. I just really kind of question that. But once again, adversity potentially makes the team stronger, and so I think that getting over the hump at Wayne County, without Lovelace. We'll see what happens this Friday as they welcome Corners. We're kind of talking final point there, just like we did with the girls, about the district season. 9A, I don't think is as strong on the boys' side as the girls' side. Now, I'm going to say that and then I'm going to be proven wrong. But looking at the other teams, I really see every reason why Richland can just win this district. I mean, I am so impressed with how a lot of these guys who are stepping into new roles this year have, really bought into the system, have become premier scorers. There's just such a deep team in a district that I don't think has teams that are as deep as them when it comes to, when Richland's healthy, of course. How many different offensive weapons they have, how deep they go on the bench, because, this is probably one of the deeper benches that Lovelace has consistently played, I think, in the last few years. And really, to me, I think there's every reason to think that, they're going to be bringing home the District 9A championship. But obviously, a lot of time between now and then to see just how this team continues to develop.
Yeah, I think the beginning of this season, they were almost a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde type team because, one night, they looked very unbeatable. And you're thinking, wow, this team could really do so. And then other nights, just think shots weren't falling. We talked about, they weren't rebounding like they needed to. And, and I'm not saying anything mean. It's just, I'd say this to the boys. They know that. I mean, that's how they get coached up. But now they're kind of finding their stride. And so, let's just face it, winning's more fun. So winning begets winning. And so I think they're getting a taste of that. So now can they take these games that they're winning by just a few points, nail biters? I know it's more exciting to watch games like that, but can they start extending those leads? And so Cornersville will be a good matchup to start district with for them on Friday night, and kind of see where they are and where their mindset is and how they're going to kind of move forward.
So Richland versus Cornersville at Dwight Clark Gymnasium Friday night. We'll have the call on WKSR. That is Jennifer and myself. And then, of course, you also can read about it and check out the photography in this next week's Pulaski Citizen print edition and on our website as well. But we're going to take another quick timeout, and we'll be back with some college football talk between Chandler and myself here on Beyond the Box Score.
The Natural Gas Department of Pulaski is here to help you save money. Natural gas is safe, efficient, and cost-effective. It's up to 50 to 60% less expensive than electricity for home heating. Plus, it's clean and efficient, so you can feel good about your choice. Call us today for service or visit our website to learn more. Make the switch to natural gas and start saving today.
And we're back for our final segment here on Beyond the Box Score, talking a little college football with Chandler Harmon. So Chandler, bowl season, always a lot of fun, always a lot of interesting matchups. But as we've seen the last few years, the SEC maybe has not lived up to the hype once it comes to the bowl season. I'll tell you, Chandler, it's so odd that this always happens. I know part of it is you have some teams who are playing in games that they don't really want to be in. You know, you have the Vanderbilts of the world that are, you know, kind of upset that they were spurned by the college football playoffs. But the SEC, 4-9, and once again, that includes 2 games in which they played each other. So, there, of course, there was a win and a loss in those games if the SEC teams play each other. But 4-9 this bowl/college football playoff season. Just, you know, what do you think about that? That the SEC has continued to struggle in this area? Yeah,
Mark, I think that it's one of those things that we knew was going to happen as the NIL era kind of took over. You know, schools are now able to compete with the recruiting that we've seen from the SEC schools, and I think that's, you know, a lot of where we saw their power come from was just that they out-recruited a lot of these other schools, and so that disparity of wealth in players has now dissipated, and so we're kind of starting to see that if you can get a good coach and, you know, have enough NIL money, you can compete with SEC schools. And so I think that speaks more to the effect that NIL has helped disperse some of those good players to other teams to where it's not just your Georgias, your Alabamas, you know, those Ohio State, you know, those schools that were able to recruit better than you and just had everyone now. And so I think that as we see that kind of take effect, the SEC is becoming just like every other conference now.
Well, it's funny. I actually think that the truth is that you hit the nail on the head there when it comes to the fact that, you know, a team like Alabama can't have a third-string NFL player anymore because, you know, those players, if they're not playing for a couple of years, they're going to go somewhere where they can get real NIL money and a chance to start. You know, people may think that's for better or for worse, but players just have a lot more agency than they've had in the past there. And, you know, it's also funny because you think about the joke that Shane Gillis made whenever he was on College Game Day, which hilarious that they were willing to put him on it a while back, in which he was like, well, now that everyone's, not only the SEC is paying players, everybody's paying players now. So that's going to change things up a little bit. I remember Nick Saban didn't appreciate that joke, but yeah, you know, I still think SEC was the best conference top to bottom this year. I know a lot of people who aren't SEC fans will kind of laugh, scoff at, you know, me saying that. But yeah, I think top to bottom, you know, I know the Big Ten may have actually been better at the top, but they've really largely proven it. But, you know, when you talk about the depth of the conference, 1 through 16 in the case of the SEC, I really still think that, you know, they're the conference to beat. But you're right that several conferences, you know, namely in this case the ACC and the Big Ten have caught to the point where, you know, you're seeing them have teams make deep playoff runs as well. Speaking of the playoffs at this point now, we have 4 teams remaining: Miami, Ole Miss, Indiana, and Oregon there. Ole Miss, the final hope for the SEC to go with a championship this one. But it's been a really interesting playoff season. You mentioned an interesting stat about Indiana.
Yeah, Mark. They'll be the first team in over 100 years to go 16-0. As you know, we've seen the college football schedule was shortened after that for many years, right, and now it's back to being 16 games. You know, when I first saw that, I was like, "There's no way." But ESPN was sharing it that Indiana would, if they won the championship, 16-0, first team since 1894, which is just crazy to think about as we've had football that long now.
Yeah, and how about the job that Kurt Signetti has done there? I think that's one of the best cases. You know, and I was looking at the difference. That one was mentioning the previous 3 years where I think, oh my goodness, I think they won 9 games in the previous 3 years. I'm going to be wrong as soon as I say that. And now they are, what was it? I think like 25-2 the last 2 years or something crazy like that under Signetti. That really shows that when you make the right coaching hire, you get some momentum, you play the portal well, and then suddenly you get NIL money because people will invest in a good product. Then you can, in the span of 5 years, go from just absolutely an afterthought to suddenly having, what to my eyes has been the most complete team in the nation all year long.
Absolutely, Mark. And I think that last week really proved just how deep Indiana is. As we saw, a team that a lot of people thought would repeat, Ohio State goes down to Miami, and now all of a sudden a lot of the teams that we thought were going to be competitors against Indiana are out, as Georgia also falls. And now you've got teams that, we aren't as sure on. But one thing that's remained, the same throughout the season, that Indiana is a competitor, and Indiana has the depth that I think to end up winning it all.
Yeah, and depending on what you count for your national championship, because remember there was a time where obviously national championship was picked by poll rather than by a playoff system or a winner-take-all game in which you knew the champion for sure. 3 of the 4 teams don't have an official championship that I think is recognized by all parties, is the stat I saw there. Miami, of course, has championships where we probably remember a few of them. I, of course, remember them in the late 90s, around the 2000 era when they were such a dominant program there. Of course, the U back in the day. But yeah, so this will be really interesting, in which you have some teams that's one of the things I like the most about this era of college football, is you're having more parity in the sense that you're having more teams that might not always have that opportunity. And really going to be interesting if we see, no offense to Miami, but one of the teams other than Miami get their first, fully recognized national championship.
Yeah, Mark, it's one of those things that everyone loves seeing, is a team that you haven't seen win a championship before, overcome all the adversity of years of not getting it, and finally, being able to hoist the trophy. Every year in professionals, we are excited to see if a new team can actually go all the way, go the distance. And this year, 3 of the 4 teams have a chance to do that and be that team that has never won a championship before, but has that chance now to be the Cinderella team that no one thought could make it, with, Ole Miss being a team that we didn't think would make it this far. They're kind of the Cinderella of this little last part of the season, and if they can pull off a win, they'll likely be facing Indiana in that last little game of the year.
Yeah, and honestly, I would kind of suspect them. And granted, every time I've made a pick this postseason, I've been wrong, so I don't know if you should listen to me. But also, shout out to Kerry for winning Fearless Forecasters. Beat me. I was about to say, if I could lose to anybody, then I'm happy it was Kerry. But I would kind of assume that Ole Miss would probably be the favorite over Miami there. And so we may be looking at an Ole Miss-Indiana national championship. Of course, like I said, anything could happen with these 2 semifinal games there as well. I will note, too, someone's going to fact check me there. Once again, the stat was, I think, an undisputed national championship. I think at least one of those teams that maybe Ole Miss may claim some kind of championship, but I'm talking about an undisputed one was the stat I saw in terms of the that was recognized by all polls there too. So last note though, I thought this was pretty interesting. Adam Hansen hit me with this statistic, and he was very, very close to being exactly right on it. He had said that 1/3 out of all Division I FBS players had entered the transfer portal. It's not quite 1/3, but it's 4,500 players now have entered the portal, and there are only about 16,000 approximately. And so that's, a little over 25%. That's about 28% of all players are in the transfer portal. That's pretty crazy, Chandler. I don't particularly know how to feel about that. What do you think initially with that idea that basically almost 1/3 of all college football players will be playing for new teams?
Yeah, Mark, I think it's kind of, we talked about the good part of the NIL. I think this is the bad part of it, is that we talked about players now have a lot more independence than they used to have, and a lot of players, if they don't see the playing time they want, are going to enter the portal. I think it's, personally, I think it's pretty bad that we're seeing, over 25% of our players leave and enter the portal, as it, it creates a lot of it destabilizes college football. As, a lot of teams all of a sudden are in a rebuild mode. Washington, I don't know if you saw that, is suing their quarterback who tried to enter the portal this week because they're saying it breached contract. I imagine that's going to be a trend that we see a lot with this, especially if we continue to see that number to inflate and grow. Early on, we kind of knew that it was going to be this bad, but or not to this extent, but we knew it would be bad with players having that ability just to enter the portal to get more money. But, early on, it's looking like this is something that's probably going to need to be regulated here soon.
Yeah, and I don't really know what the fix would be in which, you still preserve player agency and, their ability, even from a legal standpoint, to make money off their own likenesses, but also, kind of bring it back down to, it's so hard to build a team when you're losing it. And once again, not everyone's losing a quarter of their players, but when there's a chance that by the law of averages, you're going to lose a quarter of your team there, if not more. It's funny, you mentioned the suing part there. Georgia was the first team to sue a player. They sued former player Damon Wilson II, who was an all-SEC defensive end for Missouri this year, but he just entered the transfer portal yesterday, so now he's going to be with a third team in 3 years. And so it'd be funny if Missouri also sued him, and so he just is lining up different teams with lawsuits for each time he switches. But, I don't know. I feel like suing the players, I think, is almost kind of a bad branding look. I probably, if I was the marketing department for these programs, I probably would not be doing that because, if nothing else, it kind of says to other players like, hey, yeah, we're going to hold you accountable, but also, some players may kind of see that as, I don't want to go there and take a chance of being sued if I end up wanting to transfer and had signed a multi-year deal there. So I don't know. I just don't know what the answer is. But yeah, I was surprised initially to see that stat, but he was exactly right. 4,500 players entered the transfer portal out of about 16,000 Division I FBS players. So it's definitely been interesting. Any final thoughts? We're getting so close to the end of the college football season. Just kind of been one of your biggest takeaways this year.
Yeah, Mark, I think that the biggest one is that we're seeing a lot of new teams rise up and competing. One of the biggest Cinderella teams of all year that didn't get to make the playoffs, but proved a lot of people wrong. Vanderbilt, all of a sudden, not just great in football. I feel like we also got to mention they're a very good team in basketball now. This NIL era has shown us that there are some teams that can, creep up and start to compete. With Vanderbilt, I think, being probably your prime example of a team that a year ago we would have said was probably the joke of the SEC. All of a sudden, going all the way and beating Tennessee and almost making the playoffs, that's a huge jump from 1 year to the next.
Yeah, and that's another really good example with Clark Lee there, in the sense that a lot of coaches are now not only importing their staff when they're coming to a new program, but they're importing a lot of their team because obviously, Pavia and some of the Vanderbilt players, my goodness, now I'm going to forget several of them, but I feel like Stowers was one of them too, came from New Mexico State, where he was before. And so, I apologize. That's not where Lee was. That's where his offense coordinator and assistant head coach, Tim Becken, was from. So incorrect there on my thought. But, that you're seeing whenever you're even pulling in new assistant coaches, they're bringing players with them too. And so now you can basically take teams with you and, at least bring back some of that stability, and cohesion between your programs there. But, it's been a lot of fun. I know a lot of people are swearing off college football because they just say they can't support this era with NIL and the transfer portal. And while I have some things about it that I kind of question and are tough for, me to stomach, it's still college football. And, as long as they're out there playing on Saturdays, I'm probably going to still be watching Chandler.
Yeah, me too, Mark. I mean, you just can't beat college football.
Yeah, and they're not playing on Saturdays right now because it's the playoffs, but it's been a lot of fun. Hope that you had fun tuning in for this week's episode. Of course, you've been watching Beyond the Box Score. A special shout out to, of course, Chandler and Jennifer Hawkins, who joined us as well. And so a lot of basketball upcoming as we're about to start district play for both Giles County and Richland. Giles starts district play next Tuesday versus Lawrence County, and then Richland will open the district campaign this Friday night, versus Cornersville. And so thanks for tuning in to Beyond the Box Score. Hope you have a great week and enjoy some sports.